All right, everyone. It is now 10 o'clock. Good morning. I am Aaron Blumberg, SWFLN's Continuing Education Coordinator, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this morning's webinar, SWFLN's DigiRef Academy, Resources for the Law and Legal Studies. We have a wonderful learning opportunity ready for you this morning with Dr. Naomi Gold. In her most recent position, Dr. Gold served as the Assistant Dean for Learning and Outreach Services at the Walsh Library, Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey. Prior to joining Seton Hall, she served as the first-year experienced librarian at the College of Staten Island and as reference, research, and outreach librarian at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. During her time in Alabama, she simultaneously served as an adjunct instructor in the School of Library and Information Studies at the University of Alabama. Please welcome Dr. Gold and enjoy her webinar this morning. Dr. Gold?
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning to everyone. Good morning, Team SWFLN. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you today about this very important and interesting subject. And good morning, Jeanette. Thank you for being here with us. We always appreciate your services. In case you have not yet attended a DigiRef's Academy webinar, I wanted to be sure that you are aware that there are many terms for digital reference that you will see in the library literature, and this is a list of some of them. Please also know, while we're looking over this list, that this PowerPoint will be made available to you after the webinar. There are many links included in this presentation, as you will see. We're actually going to look at some of them together, but I wanted to let you know now that the PowerPoint will be made available so you don't feel anxious about bookmarking or don't feel anxious about finding some of the links that we're going to be talking about. The themes and content of the DigiRef Academy focus on a critical approach to digital reference services. We're asking the question throughout the series, is this the right mode of reference for all types of reference questions? We're looking at evaluating and improving the quality, relevance, and usefulness of this service. And very importantly, we're looking at the very specific set of mechanics that are required to perform digital reference effectively. So we're looking at specific skill sets, and we're looking for specific types of communication practices. And last but not at all least, we're looking at reference sources in depth, because knowing your reference resources is vital for delivering the service in a timely manner. And so today we're looking at law reference resources, and we are going to be looking almost exclusively at freely available web-based resources, and I will explain why. The reason we're looking at primarily freely available web-based resources are actually two. Number one, a Florida Electronic Library, although it has a great variety of resources on many topics, is rather limited in its coverage of law, and that's not any kind of implicit criticism of Florida Electronic Library. It does a marvelous job of providing subscription-based database resources to every citizen of the state of Florida. It just so happens that its collection, as related to law and legal studies, is somewhat limited. But also, very importantly, as you will have heard me say if you've been to prior webinars, when you're doing digital reference, in particular, you may be approached by anyone from anywhere. I mean, this is certainly true when you're doing desk-based reference, in-person reference, or phone reference. You may have people, sort of people from out of town, people not affiliated with your particular library branch approach you. But when you're doing digital reference, geographical boundaries really melt away, and so you can be contacted by anyone from anywhere, and you want to be able to offer those patrons materials that they can access using the web. During the course of this webinar, it could be useful and fun if you would think about some of the law or legally based reference questions that you may have dealt with, and perhaps share those experiences toward the end of the webinar. It would be interesting for all of us to hear about those and perhaps learn something from them. So do be thinking about those if you have indeed encountered those kinds of questions. I was almost hesitant to include this slide because you're all professionals and you all know, with regard to legal and medical information or legal and medical reference services, that providing the information is exactly what you should be doing and is what you do indeed do. But providing advice is, of course, not something that you ever want to be doing. But the reason I've mentioned it is because I think it can be really useful to be upfront about that with patrons, and not even necessarily verbally, but certainly in terms of signage. I think it could be really useful and helpful, especially for librarians, for some kind of proviso to be included on your website, on the landing page that takes patrons into your digital reference chat area, to mention the fact that you're happy to provide information, but of course you don't provide legal or medical advice, because there are patrons who don't, they may be in crisis for one reason or another. I mean, usually if people are calling for some kind of legal information, maybe they're experiencing some kind of stress, or they may simply not really grasp the distinction between providing information and providing advice. By articulating that boundary clearly at the outset, I think you can be helpful both for yourselves as professionals, and also for the patron, so that he or she knows what to expect. So as I was saying, with regard to legal resources, the Florida Electronic Library does have a law ebook collection. And that's really about it. I make mention here also of Academic Search Complete because it covers such a wide range of subjects, and that seems to be growing by the week and by the month. And there are some legal studies material included in that database. So when you're working with your own Florida-based patrons, you do keep Academic Search Complete in mind, but know that your own subscription resources are, as I've said, somewhat limited. If, by the way, I realize that some of you may work in academic libraries, and if you work in an academic library, it's very likely that you have at your disposal a variety of other subscription-based resources that are not part of Florida Electronic Library, so I'm aware of that. I make mention of this particularly for those of you who are working in public libraries and school libraries. I'm going to start out with Google Scholar. What can't Google do? It can't do your laundry and it can't keep your apartment dust-free, but it can be a very useful resource for finding legal documents, patents, and also material from legal journals. And in fact, I'd like you to see that now. I'm going to put a URL in the chat box, and I'd like us all to take a quick look at that so that you have your own visual experience of what Google Scholar can do for you in this area. So if you, one moment please, I'm going to put this into the chat box. And let's everyone go there. Okay, and I'm going to wait for a moment. Would you give me a check mark, please, when everyone is on the Google Scholar page? Yes, well, it's especially important for us short people, Linda. All right, is anyone not yet on that page? All right, it looks as though we're all there. All right, very good. So you'll notice beneath the search box in Google Scholar, it has articles defaulted in that radio button. There's a check mark defaulted for include patents. But what I want you to do is click on that radio button for case law. Does everybody see that? Great. Great. Okay. Okay, Evelyn, we're going to this URL. And I'm going to keep moving forward. So when you click on the case law button, notice that right beneath that, a little bit to the right, there is a hyperlink that's titled Select Courts. Everybody click on that, please. And what do you see? Well, what you see is a very comprehensive, let me see what Linda, yeah, it's a very comprehensive, well, it's actually a completely comprehensive list of state and federal courts. The courts of appeals, the Supreme Courts of each state, and all of the various circuits of the federal courts. So Google Scholar is allowing you to drill down in a very detailed way if you wanted to do that. Say if you wanted to say look for something related only to Florida law, you could do that there. On the ordinary, if you just wanted to look for something sort of in a general way, you could use just the default search box, but by choosing Select Courts, you can look for, say, just Florida law. And so I invite you, after the webinar, we're not going to take the time now, to look up some various topics related to Florida law to see how that works and what kinds of results you're able to obtain. I'm just waiting for Aaron to get caught up with Karen. One moment, please. I'd also like to let you know that once you select Florida and click Done and then go back and do your search. So I did a provisional search having selected the state of Florida for marijuana. I want to find out about, what's the state of, legality or illegality for marijuana possession and use in Florida. And a variety of other facets will appear on the left-hand side. You can limit your search to articles, case law, federal courts, and you can also select ranges of materials by date. So it's functioning in some ways, this aspect of Google Scholar, like a rather high-quality database, and I want to be sure that you know about that resource because that's really available to everyone. While we're talking about Google, and because legal materials and government materials are often so closely intertwined, I wanted to let you know about a feature of Google Advanced Search, and we're going to look at that together too. One moment, please. All right. If everyone would go to that URL, please, and I'll give you a moment to do that. Once you're in Google Advanced Search, you'll find a wide range of ways in which to limit your search. And one of them is, one of the limits is by site or domain, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's the 9th one down, site or domain. Does everyone see that? Or shall I say, does anyone not see that? Okay, great, Linda. Thank you. Is anyone not seeing that limiter for site or domain? Okay, great. I'll take that as an affirmative that we're all there. Under site or domain, if you'll type in .gov, scroll down to the bottom to the blue Advanced Search button. Actually, let me back up. You don't have to do that. Simply type in .gov and go back up to the top to find pages with all these words or exact word or phrase and perform your search. And you will find that every result that you obtain in that search comes from material that resides in the .gov domain. You can do the same thing for materials in the .edu domain. Do you see what it is that I'm referring to? So this is a way, particularly with regard to materials in the legal realm, to find materials that, yeah, it is kind of awesome. I'm glad you're feeling the joy with me, Karen. It's a wonderful way to limit your search to government documents, or also only to materials that reside in the .edu domain. And it's another topic for another day, but there's a vast array of high-quality materials residing on college and university servers. All right, so that's Google, and we're just getting started, just getting warmed up. So Google can be of significant assistance to you. There's another resource that I want to make you aware of, and I'm going to put the URL into the box so that we can look at that together, so that you can have a sight of it rather than merely a screen capture, which can be sometimes not as clear as seeing the live thing for yourself. One moment, please. All right. So if you would all have a look at that first landing page together, please. And I'll start talking while you're doing that. I really appreciate what the American Association of Law Libraries has done here. And I think that many of you will as well. What they've done is to put together a quick yet thorough kind of tutorial for public librarians to help public librarians, and I would like to add academic librarians who may be approached with these types of questions, and for whom they may not have a legal specialist to refer patrons to. It's a toolkit to help you understand the process of legal research. And so there are tutorials on subjects such as researching a legal problem, making sure you have the most current information, and then there's a whole list of state-specific public library toolkits. One of the challenges of doing legal research, and of course if you're not legally trained, unless you've had a great deal of experience in some other context, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to approach the sort of fluency and skill of somebody with legal training. But for librarians who are approached with legal questions who do not have legal training, it can be really daunting just to understand the context and process of this kind of research. And so, as I was saying, I really appreciate what the American Association of Law Libraries has done, and I invite you, if you're interested after the webinar, to explore this toolkit. With regard to dictionaries, I've listed 4 here. And you'll notice that the 3 of them are .coms. And of course, we want to be careful about using .coms for all the reasons that I'm sure you're aware of. Pardon me. These legal dictionaries came up again and again in my own research, which in and of itself doesn't have to mean anything except that Google is they're bumped to the top of Google's lists. So I went a bit further and looked to see how many of them were included on college and university library LibGuides. That is to say, how many college or university librarians had vetted these resources and deemed them of sufficient quality to include them on LibGuides. And I did include them, and I do feel confident about them, because they are indeed heavily represented in many college and university LibGuides. That last one, you'll notice, has a cornell.edu address, and as we're going to see throughout the webinar, Cornell University Law Library has an exemplary and what I can only describe as what seems as a very generous collection of web-based materials included on its site. And so the Cornell site includes a free legal dictionary and encyclopedia. Once again, let me mention that most libraries, including public libraries, are going to have some kind of law dictionary certainly in its book collection. But when you're doing digital reference, as I like to keep emphasizing, you really have to try to have as many electronic resources at your disposal as possible. I'd like to let you know now about some of the most prominent and again heavily evaluated and listed legal research resources that are available on the web. The first one is called the Court Listener, and it's updated daily. And includes opinions from the Supreme Court and all circuit courts. FindLaw.com is a database that offers Supreme Court opinions dating back to 1893, and it maintains a database of case summaries for lower court opinions dating back to 2000. Justia.com is a very extensive database of federal and state cases. So I hope you're getting the sense now that even if the only quote-unquote resource you have at your disposal is the World Wide Web, there is a lot, really a vast amount of legal material that is freely available. You are not bereft. In fact, you're far from bereft if you don't have access to LexisNexis or Westlaw. There's a lot you can do for patrons using the web. Some other resources, again, I mentioned that Cornell University is particularly thorough and generous in the resources it's created, and it has a site that's titled the Legal Information Institute, LII, and it specifically, as it articulates, is committed to providing free and open access to legal materials. And it includes access to federal and state statutes and UCC materials and a very comprehensive variety of legal materials on its site. And the last one I want to make mention of is the Public Library of Law. Again, free access to statutes and regulations for all 50 states and the federal government. So I hope you're getting the sense of just how much there is available to you no matter what kind of library you're in. One moment, please. I wanted to make mention of 3 resources that are related specifically to the Supreme Court. This first one is notable because while it contains both primary and secondary materials related to the Supreme Court, it also offers audio recordings of selected oral arguments, which in and of itself can be very interesting, but it also occurs to me that there are some patrons for whom that may be a real necessity and for whom that may provide a great service. In the second one, the American Bar Association provides the full text of briefs from a large number of U.S. Supreme Court cases, including cases that haven't yet been heard. I have a couple of friends who are real political, I don't use the word junkie, but real political animals is what I like to call them. They really enjoy politics. They are very well informed about political matters, and voting patterns, and shall I say, all of the detail about which mostly I emote, but when I want to know what the facts and figures are, I go to them. And this is the kind of site that those sorts of people who really enjoy enjoy the intellectual challenge and also the sort of the civic challenge of following the Supreme Court. This is the sort of site that they really groove on. You may have already heard of SCOTUS, but SCOTUS is a blog that is devoted to covering Supreme Court cases. And it compiles documents for most of the major Supreme Court cases. These can be very useful to you if and when you have a question related specifically to the Supreme Court. I like to think of reference often as, in its most basic form, having the right tool for the right job. And if I had a question about a Supreme Court case, I would probably go to one of these first before trying one of the larger, more comprehensive collections. I wanted to also focus on some web resources that are very specific to Florida, and I'd like us to look at a couple of these together because it occurs to me that while some of your patrons may be looking for actual primary legal resources, many of the people who approach you, especially in a public library, are looking for some kind of help, as you probably well know. In fact, I was not quite taken aback, but it was very eye-opening for me, and during one of my last visits to Fort Myers, to hear a public librarian who was in one of my sessions say, our library seems to be the first place most people approach when they are trying to apply for public assistance of some kind, or when they're looking for some kind of medical referral. It's almost as though we're functioning as a a proxy social service agency, or at least a referral site to a social service agency. Of course, we don't want to conflate those roles, but I think any of you who work in public libraries know well how often you're approached by people who are really just looking for assistance in certain areas. So let's look at this first one, floridalawhelp.org. A strange little symbol on the end of that URL. I don't know where that came from. I'll type it in again. There we go. That's better. So you'll see that its tagline, as it were, in the upper right-hand corner, excuse me, is helping low-income individuals solve legal problems. Also, please notice at the very top right that you can change the text size for this site. That's noteworthy because it's a very important element of universal design. That is to say, for designing a website such that it's as accessible as possible to the greatest number of people. Just by way of information, I wonder, how many of you are familiar with this site or have used this site before? Yes, Dean, precisely. And in fact, I'm quite sure, Dean, that SWFLN has offered or will be continuing to offer training and continuing education related to accessibility issues. So do have a look for that if that's a subject that particularly interests you. So I'm interested if you'd give me a check mark. Have any of you, are any of you aware of the site or have made use of this site? Yeah, that's true too. That's a very good point, Dean. Especially, shall I say, with the number of retirees that live in Florida or that visit Florida at certain times of the year. Aha, in a previous reference class. Okay. Yeah, I was curious as I was looking for some of the best kinds of resources that were Florida specific that would be of use in a public library. I wondered how many of you might already be aware of them. So I'm glad to be able to bring them to your attention. I'm just going to, one moment please. With regard to this floridalawhelp.org, I really appreciate the way it's designed. There's a lot of material here, but it's not cluttered. And I find that the headings for various topics are very easy to navigate. Family law, housing, domestic violence, public benefits, for example. There's a prominent link for help for homeless veterans. I think it's a very well-designed site for both patrons and librarians. Let's look at this second one. Linda, that's a really good question. I did not look to see whether there is a chat feature in any of the contact information. Excellent question. It could get complicated, certainly. I have to go back and look at that. Now you've made me curious. I have to make a note to myself. Let's look at Florida Legal Services, Inc. So, first of all, I see that the URL is a .org, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's, shall we say, it's not a guarantee the way a .edu or .gov site is, but it tells me that it's probably either a not-for-profit or a more service-oriented kind of organization. And I do indeed see right on its first page, I'm reading its mission statement, and I see that its mission statement involves advancing economic, social, and racial justice, and advocating for poor, vulnerable, and hard-to-reach people through litigation, legislative and administrative advocacy, and education. Notice also that it seems to have 4 satellite offices in Newberry, Lake Worth, Miami, and Tallahassee. So I could see that site being of significant value for certain kinds of reference questions. And this third one we're going to look at is specifically related to senior citizens. And I'm putting that URL into the box. I don't suppose I need to tell you how vital an issue that is, especially in Florida. Notice when you get to this Department of Elder Affairs site for the state of Florida, once again, Dean and everyone else, at the top right, there is a way to modify text size. Notice that the Senior Legal Helpline is very prominent on this landing page in 2 places. And one is in a box at the right, and one is in large blue font at the end of the first paragraph. And do notice that under Programs and Services in the left-hand menu, that it has a legal services program and a lawyer referral service. It also maintains a list of elder care practitioners. I think that in addition to serving senior citizens who reside in Florida, there are resources on this page that can be significantly valuable to caretakers. That is to say, adult children who are caring for their parents, or grandparents, as the case may be. I'm just curious. Give me a check mark. How many folks have used this site or seen this site before? Maybe Linda has, because in a previous. Haven't you have used this site? Would you care to? I was about to say, would you care to offer not to put you on the spot, any comments you may have about it? And we're just going to wait for Linda to, because because we don't all have microphone access. We just are patient and wait for people to type. And Linda said, contacted them for help with family member. It was an excellent service. That was my sense of it. I haven't clearly actually used it, but everything about the site, the way it's organized, the sort of the thoughtfulness with which the material is laid out, tells me that it's probably quite a good service. All right. So I hope you're beginning to feel, how shall I say, empowered and confident about providing legal reference help to your patrons, both of a more formal variety and also of a more, shall I say, self-help variety. No discussion of web-based materials related to the law would be complete without mentioning the Library of Congress. And we're going to look at some of that together as well. First of all, the Library of Congress Guide to Law Online. Let's all look at that together for a moment. All right. So you'll notice one of the, it's actually the third link from the left is there's a link to a series of legal research guides. There's a link to, also a link to guides in the LC collections. But very importantly, there's also there are links here to materials related to international law. The legal research guides are particularly valuable, and that could be, if you're really looking to delve more deeply into the topic of legal research, could be a useful thing to follow up with after you go through the American Association of Law Libraries Toolkit. I think looking at both of those, or delving into and exploring both of those, can provide you with a great self-education in the basics of legal research. I'd also like to bring your attention to the outstanding, one of my all-time favorite collections anywhere, and certainly in the Library of Congress, American Memory. And let's look at that together. So this aspect of the American Memory Collection, which is largely digitized, a vast array of digitized historical material, this collection includes congressional records up to 1875. So if you were looking for American historical material up to that point, this would be the place to come to. And I'd also like you to note if you would go to that URL, please. The URL that I just entered is the American Memory main page. And you'll notice that the collections are organized by topic, of course, and that government and law is, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's the seventh one down. And if you click on that, you'll see the full range of 11 collections related to government and law in American memory. But in any case, in case you, for some reason, if you're not aware of American memory, if you haven't used it before, this is the main landing page, and it's I'd say it's one of the greatest uses of our tax dollars that I know. Any of you folks use American memory or enjoy perusing it? Heard about it in a previous reference class? Just in general, not necessarily related to law. Let me say that when you're approached in particular by students who say that they need I need a primary source document for a class. My professor says, I need to find a primary source document. I'm still not absolutely sure what that is, but then that's your teachable moment, of course, to explain what a primary source document is. Of course, a YouTube video depicting a speech by Winston Churchill can be regarded as a primary source document. But staying closer to home at the moment, the American Memory Collection is a wonderful place to refer students who are looking for that kind of material. I was going to say, I guess most folks haven't made use of it or haven't been aware of it up to this point. Oh yes, StoryCorps. Let us not forget StoryCorps. StoryCorps, if you're if you haven't heard it on NPR, is as the name would imply, it's a very short form storytelling of a very personal nature by ordinary citizens, very, very moving and thoughtful, and all of those, and I think StoryCorps sets up, it travels from state to state and sets up booths in public spaces where people are invited to come and tell stories, and then the stories that are chosen are archived by the Library of Congress. Oh, and Dean says you're feeling better about American memory these days. All right. All right. I wanted to be sure to touch on, we saw one resource for foreign and international law. Again, I go back to Cornell, and I did mention at the beginning that what the Cornell Law School has done with the sort of the public elements of its site is exemplary, and I want us to look at that together, so that you know about this as a resource. And I'm going to wait for you all to get there. And is anyone not there yet? All right, I'm going to presume you're all there. Okay, very good. So looking at this top listing for national law material, just for fun, I'm going to go to Europe. going to click on Europe, and I'm going to click on Italy. And if you do that, or for any other country, you'll see that you have all of the most important documents, the Constitution, the makeup of the Italian Parliament, the Italian Patent and Trademark Office, intellectual property resources are all there for you. And you'll see, actually, if you happen to be on Italy, you'll see all of the other countries in alphabetical order listed around it. Actually, interestingly, today I'm seeing that some of these links are broken where they weren't yesterday. Maybe there's some sort of, maybe some part of the European web is down today. So by way of example, let's also look at, I wanted to go back to the Middle East. And I'm going to look at Israel. And now here's an interesting like explanation of absence of a constitution. So it appears Israel doesn't have a written constitution, which actually I did not even know, which is a little embarrassing. I don't know how I didn't know that. This is by way of saying that this is a really kind of one-stop shop. If you're looking for a very credible source for the most important elements of international law, excuse me, you don't need to go to Google. You can, you don't need to sort of cast around in Google. Again, using the right tool for the right job, you can come right here. All right, one moment, please. All right, I have a few things to say about health law. I have some links here that I've explored and considered. The first one, of course, is Florida specific. The second one, Health Law Advocates, is really, it's Massachusetts focused, and you may wonder, well, what is that doing there? And the reason I included it is because it's such an interesting kind of program. It's such an exemplary kind of program. I was reading the site very avidly and thinking that it's something that it's a sort of organization that every state should aspire to. So I included it. I can imagine that for any reference librarian, maybe with the exception of that second one, which is, as I say, Massachusetts specific, any one of these links can be helpful to you if you're presented with health-related legal questions, or if you need to refer people on to some high-quality service organization. Immigration law, very important. A fantastic overview of immigration law as it exists at this moment in the United States, again, comes from Cornell. and I encourage you to read it. They've done such an excellent job. There is an American Immigration Lawyers Association, an Immigration Advocates Network, very specifically a Mexican American Legal Defense Education Fund. So when exploring these kinds of questions, I encourage you to kind of have your own personal kind of set of LibGuides, your own set of best resources for certain kinds of questions, and to make use of these when you're approached with immigration questions, which I know for a fact many public librarians in particular are. In particular, I'll put this URL in. One moment, please. There's a very comprehensive list of, shall we, for lack of a better term, how-tos. On the site Immigration Direct. Mine is taking some time to load. There it is. And so I'll let you explore that on your own. One of the last things I want to make you aware of is this. Privacy law. The single best resource that I found related to privacy law is called Privacy International. It's based in London. It has an office in DC. And its whole purpose in life is to conduct research on privacy issues worldwide. Its website offers up-to-date news and information on foreign and domestic privacy issues. It makes a point of looking into issues related to government surveillance and the companies that enable government surveillance. And it also assists with litigation with regard to surveillance. So this is, I suppose I don't need to tell you, an issue of the most vital importance, or at least of the most vital interest. And this is what I like to call one of those gold standard sites for this issue. The last thing I wanted to make you aware of was this really wonderful public-private, I'm not even sure if I want to articulate it as public-private, but a partnership between a county law library and the County of Los Angeles Public Library. That partnered to develop not just a model, but a sort of whole basket of services that increased the general public's access to legal information. Let's just take a quick look at that together. And the reason I bring it to your attention, although this is LA-based, is because it's, again, like that health services site in Massachusetts, it's something to aspire to. It's so exemplary that it strikes me that it can serve as a kind of template for for other cities. And this article, which I'll let you read on your own, comes from the Urban Libraries Council. It appeared to me when I read about it as this kind of idyllic state of affairs, an idyllic kind of partnership. And if at some point in your careers or in your travels through the library world and the world of library services, you were, wondering, well, has there ever been a partnership between a dedicated law library and a public library? How did they make that work? What kinds of decisions did they have to make? What kind of actions did they take? And how is it working out? I encourage you to read more about this partnership. Yes, and public service-oriented people. I mean, people who, they're all library people, so to speak, but they put aside whatever, should we say, the differences that come with their particular specialties to create a new type of service for the greater community. All right, I've been talking for over an hour, so I'm going to stop. I wanted to ask if there are any comments. I was particularly interested, not to get too far off topic, but I was interested, Dean, you mentioned that you had found American Memory to be somewhat incomplete and you hadn't been happy about using it in the past, and I was a little bit curious about that. If you curious about your experience in that regard. So I'm just going to wait for their topics. I am more of a historian as I'm an archivist over Regional History Center. I see. I see. Linda, that's another excellent observation. I did not come across Stetson, nor did I, let's see, I didn't look at Stetson or consider Stetson as a resource, but I appreciate you bringing it up because it's if and when I do this kind of presentation, again, it's clearly something that I should look at, so I'll make a note of it. I want to say, Linda, are you asking me whether it is, or are you saying that in the past Stetson has in fact functioned as a kind of community resource? Oh, okay, I wasn't aware of that, but thanks for letting me know. I'm going to make a note of that. And I'm just reading Dean's comment. Well, thank you for sharing that with me. It's interesting that you're coming at it from a very particular kind of professional orientation, whereas I spent so much of my time grooving on facsimiles of old sheet music. So I think I appreciate your kind of professional and critical eye in that regard. No, I appreciate hearing about that. Jeanette, I'm waiting for another comment that's coming in. Aha. I see. So they don't tell you if this particular collection of digitized materials ranges from 1890 to 1915 and include, I see. That, I think you have an excellent point there. I have to go back, and it's some of the areas of American memory that I'm most fond of browsing largely for my own enjoyment with a more research-oriented eye and look for that. I see. Excellent point. No. Far from apologizing, actually, you opened my eyes in a certain way because, first of all, there's no such thing as being too historically research specialized. That is not a problem in any way, shape, or form. And I'm actually myself, just personally, and I think we all are very eager to hear about the perceptions and experiences and the particular sort of places we're coming from as professionals. You've made me aware of a possible shortcoming, just say in American memory, that I wasn't aware of, and so your comment is actually very helpful. Moreover, I have complete and utter respect for the detailed historical researchers. It's 11:12, and I know that some of you probably need to go back to work. I can stay online for a while longer, so I think I'm going to wrap up here. Again, I'm happy to stay online and chat with any of you further, but I think I should let Aaron wrap up, and so that the folks who need to go can go.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Gold, for a wonderful webinar. We were very lucky to have been able to participate in this learning opportunity. Some great information and a sneak peek of what is coming up. Attendees, I'd like to encourage you to sign up for the next webinar of the Handling the Storm of an Angry Customer, O's for Ownership, which will be next Friday, March 18th. And the next webinar of SWFLN's DigiRef Academy, Resources for American and World History, will take place on Thursday, April 7th. We encourage you to look at upcoming webinars and workshops in all our months ahead, and hope you're able to join us for future training opportunities. Please feel free to keep checking the continuing education calendar on our website, the Florida statewide training calendar, the SWFLN Facebook page, and be sure to follow us on the SWFLN Twitter. We also hope you look for your message from SWFLN on the Florida Library listserv. Thank you, have a wonderful day, and a great weekend.
Yes, and my thanks to Aaron, again, and particularly Lily Castro, who works very hard to ensure that the members of the SWFLN community have access to these learning opportunities. And to Jeanette, thank you very much for being here today with us. We appreciate you. Have a good weekend, everyone. Bye, Jeanette. That's not to, I mean, you can stay.